Welcome to OMG Real Talk with your host, Anna Miss Thing. And of course, you know I am Flossom. So, have we got a combo for you today? So, here's my question. In actual fact, no. Let's go with what the topic is. Today's topic of conversation is, first of all, before I do that, let me introduce our guests. I've lost my manners. Ladies, please introduce yourselves in the top right corner. Go for it.
Hi, guys. I'm Katie, and you can also call me Kate for short.
Awesome. And in the bottom right corner, Susan, bottom right.
Oh, what? I was just so kind of dying.
Right?
Yeah, I'm in the bubble. I'm just like, yeah. My name is Suzanne.
Okay, and of course, in my left corner.
Hi, I'm Janelle, and you can call me Jan for short.
Okay, awesome. So our topic for this evening is, of course, the swear word racism. Oh my gosh. And white fragility. What is that? Okay. Now, before we go in depth, have any of you heard of the term or aware of the book? Okay, so now I have issues because now, all of a sudden, Mother Dearest has decided to call. 1 second. It's great. Hello, Mother. I love you, dear, but unfortunately, I can't speak at the moment because I'm actually live. Okay. Okay. Bye. Okay. You see, this is show business, guys. Show business, and you can't ignore your mama. Anyway. So go ahead. Have any of you heard of white fragility?
I have.
Yes.
Yeah. What have you heard about it?
Only from the title of the book, to be honest. I think it came out like a couple of years ago or so, and I kind of saw the book floating around, but not really looked at a book. Because I think when I kind of looked at it, I thought, well, that's obviously not for me because that's not speaking to my experience. So let me pass on that one. But a colleague of mine has read it, I know.
Okay. So anyone else?
Yeah, I'm aware of the book and and the topic area that it explores as well. So
okay.
yeah.
And what about you, Katie? What do you think?
I haven't read the book myself, but I am aware of what it is.
Okay. So let me give you guys just an insight. The book itself is called exactly that, White Fragility, and why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. And it's by Robin DiAngelo. And she goes into the challenges in the book that white people face on actually being exposed to this. Now we can say it's a pandemic as well at this time, and how they are dealing with it. So they don't see white as a race which protects and keeps bias hidden. They are uninformed about the complex and enduring race dynamic. They don't understand socialization into different groups that are compared, and the racial status quo is comfortable for them. So they don't want change, and they are silent, resistant, and defensive or certain about racism. So does that kind of sound like something that we would have heard of? Because I think one of the things that I've looked at over these past few weeks, especially after the deaths that have been highlighted and brought forward, it isn't that people are not wanting to talk about it. It's the fact that it's such a touchy subject that you don't want to offend as well, and that's one of the things that they talk about. So, it talks about race is socially, not biologically constructed for reasons of self-interest. The US is a melting pot and only included European immigrants. Race is encoded in geography. White is the invisible ideal and norm. Other races are an exception. There's prejudice, which equals thoughts and feelings that lead to stereotypes, attitudes, and generalizations. Discrimination is oppressive, often subtle, and action based on prejudice. Collective prejudice underpins the structure and system of racism, and only whites have power to implement the racism system. Racism is the birdcage that restricts possibilities. So it just goes on and on. So in light of that, you know, where do we go from here? So the crime, Preston, is I am positively sure all of you have been in a conversation where someone says something derogatory, and then another, and then our Caucasian counterparts will say, "Oh, well, I'm not racist. I have a black friend." And then you say, "Okay, so when did they come round to your house?" And then there's silence. Because when do they come round? A friend is someone you socialize with out of the work environment. Mm-hmm. A friend is someone you will call and say, "Hey, girl, blah, 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 whatever." So determine your version of a friend. Mm. Or are you just polite to your co-workers? See, so that's just one scenario. And then they have brought in the facet of, how did racism start? Of course, we know it's from colonialism and things like that. That's not the issue at hand. But how is it continually perpetuated? Mm. And what people are now addressing is it had to be generational. It has to be the fact that a grandfather passed it to the son, and then the son, then who became a father, passed it to his children. Because when you see children playing together, especially in primary, elementary age, they do not see color. Mm-hmm. It's then the adults that perpetuate, and it continues. So as we go on to the topic of right fragility, how then, and this is the question, I'm being blessed to be a part of a think tank, and we are actually, it's a very diverse think tank of all ethnicities, so they're very smart on who they picked. And what they're doing, and that's how this topic is being brought back into the highlights, is we are looking at where do we go from here? How do we as a people today in the 21st century move forward? That's the major question. So, Kellyanne, I see you're shaking your head. You can relate to some of these topics. Go for it, girl. What's your first comment?
I can definitely relate to it because of, for many reasons, I do have a lot of friends that are white, as well as most of the people that I work with predominantly are white, and they consider themselves to be progressive. Okay. But then when it comes to the root of it, there are certain like mindsets and ideas and things that they would say that actually contradict that. And then when you try to explain it to them, that's when the white guilt come into play and the white fragility, essentially.
Right. Okay. Susan, in your line of work and in your field, have you encountered that?
Yeah. The very fact that when talking about race and racism and acknowledging that it is a social construct, it means that it is something there actually the experience of whiteness is not often explored. So when we talk about race, we start talking about people within the African diaspora or other people. The language of talking about racism then gets caught into minority groups or the minoritized. But within that, there isn't often a conversation about whiteness. Now, one, I'm not looking to center the experience of white colleagues within the conversation. It's very interesting that when talking about race, often white colleagues will say, "What's with this race thing? Because I don't really see myself as white." And that shows we're in a racialized society. The race is so politicized that white colleagues don't need to view themselves as a race. They're just individuals. Whereas minoritized groups, racialized groups, particularly people of African, Asian descent, are racialized, and they're poured within a catch-all of blackness. where we are some monolithic group and attributed a number of different factors, levels of intelligence, aspects of our culture, all sorts of facts, our sexuality, all sorts and interests, all sorts of things just to our own. So because of that, it becomes a very odd conversation to have in tackling racism, because in order to affect change, you have to first acknowledge that you have a problem. And if the majority group of our society are in a situation of slight denial as to there even being a problem, because we're all one race, aren't we? We're all in the human race. So that immediately, so it involves a lot of unpacking.
Right.
And within that unpacking, there is an element where you can understand the dismantling of everything that was known or thought to be true occurs
in their mindset.
And you can either react through the guilt, which is part of the fragility that comes in, or the denial.
Right.
And
which is the other side.
And the cognitive dissonance that comes with that. So you can be in a state where you can see the facts,
right?
See someone dying, see a colleague in your office being ignored, see you get the promotion over someone that you kind of know was better than you would do the job, but still feel that it's a meritocratic society, and still feel that actually, what's all this police brutality? You know, I agree with what you're saying, but can't you just do it nicely? You know, can't you just protest nicely? So there's this battle.
We protested nicely. Kaepernick protested so nicely in 2016 on a knee. I mean, that's the proposal term. Everybody should have been okay with the proposal of peace. Come on.
But this is a thing. The fragility comes. It's a constant battle with the stereotype,
right?
Because when people are protesting nicely or silently, actually the narrative is of stereotypes around aggression.
Okay.
Stereotypes, yes, around aggression and confusion and poor leadership and anger. Exactly. So when you have someone quietly doing something, that in itself is.
What is that?
So that's why you see it playing about in, people quickly. Black Lives Matter's protesting. Let's quickly gather up all the statues and cover them because it's going to be a riot. And
So Janelle, in your remit of line of work, have you experienced it? Do you get that awkward silence?
Yes.
That's what happens. You guys, you might be with another colleague of African descent, or even Asian, because that's when your Asian counterparts kind of hang with you. When they realize there could be a certain issue, they need an ally. And if you notice in the workplace, it is always the Black man that is the voice for change, for discrimination and racism. You don't ever, to me anyway, see the Asian person standing up and say, hey, that's not right. We shouldn't do that. But from the Black man stands up, they're behind. Yeah, you're right. That's not fair. So it's just like, where do we go from here? That is the question. So, in your line of work, because you're in education, have you experienced that in the staff room or?
Please.
It's okay when you're in the hallway, everyone's politically correct. But once you get in the staff room, either something's been said, and then there's a silence when the Negro comes in the door. the Negroes are talking, and then someone else comes in, and there's like, that kind of thing. So, what have you experienced in your arena?
I recall a very conversation that I had with a few colleagues of mine. So it's me, I'm like the only Black amongst my close friends that I work with. And one's white, and the other two are Asian. But interesting enough, one of the colleagues who's Asian, has got a PhD in looking at racism in education.
Okay, awesome.
So we're having a conversation with this colleague of ours who is white.
Okay.
It's simple. And we said, oh yeah, well, what you're saying was, I can't remember what you said, but you said, oh, what you said was racist. And it was, I'm not racist. I'm not being racist. I'm like, no, what we're trying to tell you is what you're saying was racist. I'm not saying it's you. You're saying that what you said. I'm like, how's it go from what you said was racist to
you are right? It's the behavior.
I'm not.
That's
not me.
Not the individual.
Right. So I think there is an issue here. And like he was saying, oh yeah, but my mum's black, and I'm
I love that one. I love that one.
And it showed me a picture. I was like, okay,
yeah.
Thinking, what happened?
But
did she
then
tell you
when
anything?
I have identified that, especially with working with young people, is that oftentimes they'll pick a side. They won't actually just say, look, no, I'm of biracial, I'm mixed heritage, and I'm for both. I've grown and come into a loving family, both sides, there's no color line. They're either I'm black or I'm white.
Yeah. I actually don't believe it's just young people. I think it's something that has been ingrained in a lot of us for a very long time, as far as like picking a side. Regardless if it's race, culture, whatever, for whatever reason, people find it very hard to place you in a category when you don't want to put yourself in there.
Right.
So, especially for like a lot of the biracial like people in the world, they either, oh no, I identify as black, or actually, I think I'm more so this or that. It's
if your name's Rachel Dolezal.
My favorite one is, oh my God, why is his name just left me? The golfer. Oh my gosh. Tiger Woods. He said he's triracial.
Sure.
I'm like, right. Hey, I love it. That's what he said. He's not black. He's not white. He's not Japanese. He's triracial.
So he is all three.
Yeah, he's all three. And and everybody looked at him like, okay, you're confused. Because one thing I can say with the African American and American mindset, you can have 1 ounce of black. You're black.
And then you're black. That's where it comes into play of you having to pick a side. So unless you're white passing, like, I don't know if you know who Rashida Jones is.
No.
Yeah.
So she's an actress. She was recently on a series on Netflix. I think it's called like Black as Fuck or Black AF, sorry. And she was getting a lot of flack for the fact that most people actually keep forgetting or don't even know that she is actually half black, because she's very white passing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Exactly. Whereas
she could be in the house, as they say.
Exactly, like you have to constantly defend that. So I also feel like it's what people tend to like play into. So they can play into their black side or play into their white side. And I think that essentially is their own fault that people then try to make them pick a side, because they're the ones who started picking sides to begin with.
Right.
Always acting as if, or choosing roles that are white-ish.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So here's some of the lines that you'll hear when we have these staff room or in the office conversations, even on the bus, actually. I'm really nervous and scared or uncomfortable to say this, but from my experience and perspective as identity, or I'm afraid I may offend someone, and please let me know if I do, but it feels risky to say this and it just keeps going. So these are the lines that your white counterparts will start the conversation with, because they're put in a position where, and when I think about it, I think as well, in some aspects, it's unfair to everybody. And I'm going to say why I say this. Some people who are born now, especially now in the 21st century, and many people who I think are definitely like, I would say 45 down, this is not intentionally their mindset. Majority of people coming under that, if you meet them, they're not so close-minded. Do you see what I mean? But because of society and what has been perpetuated through the ages, it's sometimes hard to get out of that, because you will have someone who's Caucasian that wants to have, a black girlfriend or white girlfriend, and they'll take you home and they'll get cut off. they won't be able to go home with that partner. They won't even, you will say, oh, how's your grandmother? I don't know them. Do you see what I mean? They have to be with their partner. They have to cut themselves off from their family and lose their inheritance. That's ingrained.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So as much as some of, I mean, we're living it just from you seeing this beautiful chocolate melanin, and we just gorgeous like that. And I'm sorry, I'm just bringing up Blair, right? But at the end of the day, I still try to look. I mean, my first encounter with Caucasian children was not pleasant. You're welcome. You're welcome. We got a thank you for our voices. I went to a school where I was the only Black girl in the village. And I would come to school daily and have a banana on my desk. Or I would be called Jungle Bunny or Wog or Gollywog and I would be just, what are they talking about? Because from coming from home, coming from our culture, I'm a cute, well, I must have thought I was cute little Black girl, what are you talking about? And the one person that became my friend, I will never forget her till this day, was Kate. And she said, don't listen to them. They're talking nasty. Don't worry about it. I'm your friend. And she really was my friend. Do you see what I mean? And this was my little white friend, the two of us skipping around, playing, do whatever. But sadly, once we got to high school, I went to one, she went to one, and that friendship dissipated. And I even tried to connect again, thinking, oh my God, I found her. That's my friend. But I just think our worlds now were so far apart. And I felt sad about that. So it's like, you might be fragile in some aspects because you don't know how to deal with it. And this perspective is new to them. And they're wondering if what I'm saying is accurate, because you'll get it where people will say, I don't want to offend you, but, and then you'll have the other one where, oh my gosh, those Black folks, oh, but I don't mean you. You're not like that.
You're not Black, apparently.
You see, my understanding of white fragility is somehow different. I've spent quite a few years working in organizations and supporting employees dealing with racism in the workplace. And what I've found, and this is just a personal observation that's consistent, is how difficult it is to call out discrimination, right? Whether that you want to call it, people don't even sometimes call it racism. No. They'll call it inappropriate behavior. They'll call it this boss is just carrying on, did you?
Yeah.
It might be bullying, might be harassment, it just might seem unfair. But a lot of colleagues sometimes don't actually call it racism. However,
because that's a swear word.
Despite that, a lot often those who are the perpetrators of these in less inclusive behaviors, I think often understand what's really going on. And I can understand they understand when, for example, colleagues who are the victim of these behaviors find themselves put in the position of aggressor, even though they might have just been on sick leave for how long, complain because of the poor behaviors in the workplace, stress, and all sorts of health factors. When they're in that point of mediation, they find themselves having to comfort their boss, having to appease, having to sometimes deal with tears. Whereas that person suddenly the tone, suddenly there's a conversation. Suddenly the conversation isn't about the content of what's happened. It's about centering on the other individual's experience of them as, while not these terms, sometimes they creep in, but as aggressive. Sometimes as sometimes antagonistic, unreasonable. And before you know it, the discomfort at the realization that something other than merit, performance, facts might be driving this conversation
Right.
can cause things to break down and unpack. Sometimes it's in tears. I've had people who have been dealing day in and day out with very aggressive behavior, suddenly finding themselves in a situation of having to apologize to the very boss that's been bullying them, having to be seen as apologize for bringing up a grievance complaint case. Actually, why are you complaining when you're the person who's nearly getting sacked here?
But
All of these things
that goes in with the bullying mindset, which is they say it's not, it's, they don't realize they're doing it. It's unintentional, but it's institutionalized. So
exactly,
you know, that's the issue. So you've got here like this racism as either or. So you've got the racist bad, which is ignorant, bigoted, prejudiced, mean, old, and then of course they give it Southern. And then you've got not racist, which is the good one, which is progressive, educated, well-intentioned, open-minded, young, and where they see them as the Northern. And you know, even here, even in the UK, you still have that North and South divide, because in the South, you can say supposedly in London and, you know, down here, like Watford, you know, things like that, people are much more affluent, you know, everyone's shopping together, they're doing this. When you start going further up north, they're like, what are you doing out here? You better stay in your car because you don't know who's coming to meet you. Do you see what I mean?
I think that's also a myth, because while London and many other cosmopolitan cities of Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool has a lot of diversity, I think it's similar to a lot of these states. Depends where you go.
Right.
So like when I go to New York, I'm taken aback by the kind of certain levels of diversity, and I see in Brooklyn all the duck shops. But then again, you go around the block and you're in a different situation. It's similar to London, where you are still here, and this is the thing with Fragility. It pours a light on the fact that within a society you can have many different narratives, many different experiences, and if you are in a position of privilege, you can be living in London and with amongst your affluence and within amongst your closeted group of friends who are maybe similarly affluent, and not be alive to the fact of certain communities feeling that they can't trust the police, feeling hesitant to go and seek mental health services, to go to their GP if they're in need, and all these other factors that are a sign of a systemic racial inequalities.
Okay, so let's how does race shape whiteness? So whites belong racially in most settings, as whites are seen to be always the majority. Whites are free from the burden of race, being mistaken for less than race stereotypes. Whites are free to travel anywhere and belong. Whites have long benefited from tremendous advantages of majority, and geographic segregation is systemic, and upward mobility is the white majority. So, you know, when we look at things like that, how do you then see, like, especially in today's society, you know, I was taught to treat everyone the same, no judgment. I marched in the 60s. I was the minority and experienced racism, which was temporary. My parents taught me not to be racist. Children today are so much more open, and race just has nothing to do with it. Focuses on race is what divides us.
I think that's the issue.
Many think today.
I mean, I reflect on my own upbringing from, I think it's been like 4 in nursery school, seeing, because where I grew up was predominantly white. So the only black people I saw was my family and 2 other families in the area, and a few Asian started here and there. And I remember being in nursery and seeing the white parents taking their kids further away from me, and that's like my first instance of recognizing that, okay, there's a difference between me and them. And then from primary school, kids looking at you. And as you were saying about the North and South divide, I mean, I remember working in a school just out in Doncaster, just outside of Sheffield up north, and seeing all the teachers introducing themselves to me, predominantly white, obviously, because Doncaster is a predominantly white area. And one teacher who came to see me is older. He looked at me as if he'd seen a ghost. And I remember this experience specifically because I remember walking through the school and seeing every person staring at me. Even when I was going home, kids like, right, miss, right, let's see. I was
Oh my God. So you were a spectator sport.
Literally. So this whole thing about, I've always known from a young age growing up that I'm different, I'm inferior to white people, and therefore I'm less than, and I'll always be seen as less than. Whereas the narrative of superiority of the white race has never been touched.
Right.
It's never been explored and never been unpacked and exposed. And that's what we are seeing now. So then now people are feeling like they're on the back foot. Well, I don't want to say anything because if I do, I'm going to offend people. Well, regardless of whatever you say, you're going to offend somebody at some point.
We've been offended. We've been offended for how many years now?
Yeah. You've done that. I mean, there's no point trying to be, well, I'm going to be all apologetic about it and not say anything. Well, you at the end of the day, you can't avoid the issue. You have to understand that even though you were not the perpetrators of, slave ownership and all of that, you are still reaping the benefits of that. You are not still, you will not be stopped by police. You will not be looked down. You will not be followed. Like after lockdown, I was followed in Whole Foods by a security guard. He was literally 3 feet away from me. I'm like, he was happily chatting away. Next thing you know, I'm seeing walk past me at least 3 times. I'm like, is this guy all right? He was having a big conversation. As soon as I walk in, he found a reason to walk around. Like he remembers what his job was. I'm like, nah. So I think it's about really exposing and helping people understand that freedom is a constant struggle. It's, as Angela Davis wrote in the title of her book, if you're going to be on this journey with me and fighting against racism, you need to recognize that this is not a one thing that you do by going on a march. This is not a one thing that you do by signing 5 petitions this week and another 5 the next week and donating to BLM. And that's all well and good. And maybe seeing putting a black face on TV for once in a while.
Don't start me on that. Don't
No. We go in there. Like
don't start me on that.
My classic.
I went through a period at Christmas time of losing my mind. Every single commercial had a mixed couple, even one grizzly looking man that I was like, I know my black queen would not have dealt with him. Do you know what I mean? Because he looked a hot mess.
Yeah.
And they were happily living. And what I clocked was there's not one black nucleus family, a husband and wife. You're showing all of these commercials, but none of the families were a full black family. And they kind of started to get really, angry. And I was like, you're not really identifying with me. Yes, I know there's many biracial couples, whoop-de-doo. But you had to get 2 black people together to get the black man.
So across over here, the other side of the pond, for me, it's a little different on TV in the sense that when we do get these black couples and these black families, they are very fair skinned. In fact, 9 times out of 10, just from looking at them, they're possibly biracial. Mm-hmm. It is so rare to ever see a black family or couple on TV here that looks like me, unless it's on like the BET channel or some sort of like black network. You get what I mean? Right. And I don't know if that's worse or better. But what we would almost never see is a biracial couple, or rather an interracial couple with like a black woman and anything else at that. You would see like a black man and his white wife, and then their little mixed babies for like Kmart or Walmart or whatever. But you're not going to see
a female other way counterpart.
You almost never see a dark.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I've noticed that on US TV, which is kind of weird to me. But I think for the first time last year, that's when I noticed the companies that did it were like NatWest, what's that? They do travel, Expedia, and British Gas. They were the first ones to have the black female with the white husband. Do you see what I mean? So they were like, look, we're being equal. We've switched it up. But
so one of each, right? Yeah. Balance.
We gave y'all one. Be happy. We gave y'all one.
And the thing is, when you're in the office, or I've been in scenarios where because I worked in the family court, and so of course we had cases of all different issues with families and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes some of the social workers that would come in or do whatever, because they didn't and have an understanding of the child's background and what could actually make that child be more comfortable and beneficial, decisions were being made legally for children to be moved or not have certain interactions with parents. And that wasn't in their best interest because they didn't understand. So a prime example, we had a case where a child was complaining that they only ate chicken all the time and they wanted something else. Okay, so they liked when they were living with when they were at the dad's, because now the dad had a new girlfriend, the new girlfriend took other food. So I was laughing, first of all, right? But then it transpired that they were taking these things saying, well, the mom is not giving the child diversity, variety, they're forcing them to have only one palate. And I had to step in one day and say, where does your mom actually come from? And she was like, oh, well, my mom's from the Caribbean. And I said, she's West Indian. I said, yeah. I said, let me help you. Staple for a West Indian is chicken. It's not that they're just only giving chicken. The staple is chicken, and they may even do curry goat. When I started to name the food, the child said, yes, I've had curry goat. I said, what, have you had oxtail? I've had oxtail. I said, but you're not asking the questions. You're just going that this child is being subjected to only this, when that's not the case, because you can't relate to the child where they're coming from. Well, I didn't, when it's not like, I said, no, you're not relating to the identity of this child. And for me as well, having fostered, and I fostered boys, and they were white. And when they first came to me, I actually got subjected to being in the mall, and people were looking at me because they were hanging on to me both sides, and they were looking at me, and they were and whispering. And I said, they must probably think I've kidnapped these children.
Or you're the nanny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what was the shock was because the boys started to call me Auntie Anna. And they kept saying, Auntie Anna, we want this. Auntie Anna, we want that. And the one woman looked at me and I said, yeah. I said, and I just messed with her. I said, oh, they're my brother's children. And she looked at me and she turned her head. And so it's that misconception that they also have of us as a people. Like, you get a lot of people now that they eat all kinds of foods. The English palate is very broad, right? And for the past 10 years in a row, the English national dish is no longer fish and chips. It's, what is it?
Vindaloo.
A chicken vindaloo or a chicken korma, right? So that shows that they've really taken on the melting pot of, the different authenticity that have come into the country. But it's okay for you to eat the food and say that it's, this is the case. But then when we're trying to talk to you and address the issues like the Windrush, we're not discussing that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the part of racism is, as I said, turning things into such a monolith that Black culture gets watered down just to a few bits and pieces. And it's also important that even in our own rhetoric, and what we define as blackness, that we also don't feed that, because, you know, I remember, I'm just building on what you said, Anna.
Yeah.
I remember at school, I used to, I was in an English lesson, and I remember part of the tool of this like 80s, not 80s kind of teaching of trying to make everything cool and with it, was to try and say Macbeth in different dialects. So they looked at me and said, okay, we've heard it in a very Shakespearean language. Let's have it in patois now. So they looked around the class and they said, right, Suzanne, why don't you come on? You bring it, bring the patois, bring the patois. And I'm like, now this isn't because I was suddenly losing touch with my blackness, but ultimately I am part of a diaspora, a global diaspora. And my reference point, my family don't speak patois. We're from Trinidad, Grenada, but we got Beijing, we got, we got a lot of there, but within our immediate family, we don't have any. So yeah, while I could, I tried to, because before Jamaicans were cool, so you have to kind of get a few of the. But I thought to myself, hang on. So this kind of thing, even within our own communities, of what's defining blackness, what's defining what people from the Caribbean eat, or people from parts of Africa, the various states and nations of Africa eat, or whatever. We've got to realize not to play into that. But I think this kind of fragility, discomfort around anything to do with race is challenging. But it's really not for me to educate. A lot of this is it's a very much a journey of self, and understanding and freeing of self. Just like, dare I say, not to say just, but because it's affecting us all, just like I am having to do the work continually and understanding my history as a woman of African heritage, to journey through the West and get to the Caribbean and find themselves in parts of London and the rest of the world. Other people have to do that work too. So while I have come across the Karens and Beckys
I
of
love
this
that
world.
new term, Becky was first and now we got Karen. It's hilarious.
I know. But nothing respect to those Karens who are woke Karens and out there, but many there are many there. While we're getting all there are many also.
No, come on. If you address that, like, even though I'm joking, you have to look at that. That is quite scary, in the fact that a human being, an individual, will know that if I dial 911, 999, and I say, I am being attacked by a black whatever, the police will come faster. There's an issue there.
There is.
You should just be saying, I'm being attacked. I need help.
But that's always been the case, though.
But this is why we're saying this era is institutionalized. So when you sign your oath of to serve and protect, you say to serve and protect, but then on the fine point, the small writing, it says, but if you hear it's a Negro, you run faster. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, how does that rhetoric even start to get in? And one of the things I try to explain to people in the United States, the police originally, under Jim Crow law, they weren't to serve and protect the neighborhood. They were to scoop up the Negroes and get them put in jail and incarcerated and locked up. That's what the police was formed for. That's what they were to do. That was their role. And this is why I think some people forget that rhetoric. Initially, that's what their job was, to find the Negro and get him locked up or get him to the KKK or whatever, so you could see another one hanging in a tree. you know. And so now we want to transition and say, no, you're here to serve and protect, to look after the community, to do it, but that's still in there. And you've got to remember, you've got police chiefs and people that have been working there from when MLK was murdered. Remember, people don't want to leave because they want to get their nice retirement package, right? Mm-hmm. So they'll stay till they're like 65, 70. So you think about it. This is the mindset. And remember, you've got that blue line. What we do here stays here. So
it's like a boys' club, isn't it?
That is.
Worse. It's a whole mafia gang. It's like worse than a boys' club, because to get in is one thing, to get out is also another thing.
That's true. When a police officer is not happy, as we've seen some who vocalize that they're there to serve and protect, they're not there to be abusive or to ill-treat their badge, they've been fired.
Mm-hmm. The issue that I have, though, like with over here, I was having a similar conversation, you know, actually with my school, actually. And I remember my head teacher was referencing to seeing a few of the black boys, students that we have at our school, and seeing how he witnessed how their demeanor changed when the police officers showed up. It was just like, this is just unbelievable to me, you know, the way they were behaving, because obviously, you know, there's to be well-managed students and all of that. And I says, well, you know, that what we see on a regular basis, unfortunately, plays in as part of it. And for me, I kind of see it as a form of grooming in some ways, in the sense that they're being trained, or this is a narrative that we have in our heads about who black people are, and we are gonna beat you up, rough you up, knock you, do whatever we can to eventually play into that role. And in some cases, you may end up in a gang, you may end up doing all kind of foolishness to the point where they do get caught for doing something wrong, committing some crime or whatnot. And that's the issue in and of itself. And then
you just brought up for me. Okay, so having worked in the legal profession here in the UK, I remember dealing with cases where, one, when the police were called, and it was because the term here is an IC3. So when they call for an IC3, there's not one squad car that goes. The minimum is 3. Okay. When we ask them, because now I'm on the defendant side, what's going on? Well, you know, a lot of them we know sometimes smoke and they get a bit, you know, so we got to try and make sure we can restrain them. You know, it's more for the safety of the public, you know. I said, but you got called for a domestic violence, okay? Or you got called because the shop man's not happy that he's there. You don't need that many people. You're being foolish. So there's that rhetoric. Then we had that all of us smoke. We're all weed heads, right? And so many in the 80s, there's cases we've had to fight where when they got them in the cells, they would say they were violent. So because they were violent, they used to inject them to subdue them. So then we would have many young black men coming out from being incarcerated, having now mental health issues. And so again, it's this thing about subduing them. It's the mindset, you know, and when you talk to people, especially to white people, their feelings, they feel like you're singling them out. We're attacking them now with this racism issue, or they feel like their voice is silenced because if they say something, they're going to offend the world, right? They're now being judged. They're being insulted. They're outraged. You're accusing us of being racist. They're also scared. Some of them feel guilty, shamed, and angry. And then their behaviors will be they're crying, or they'll leave. They'll withdraw from the conversation, or they'll start arguing. They'll be denying, focusing on the intentions and seeking absolution or avoiding. So that is something. When you go to court and you take these officers to court, it's a completely different story. It wasn't like that. That wasn't how it was perceived. Oh, no, I would not. I've got sons of that same age. You know, I wouldn't, you know, do that. But you didn't treat this person the same.
Well, this is the reason why that in talking about, there's a lot of the direct in-your-face racism that goes on, right? And that's the stuff that you talked about when, you know, as Dan was saying, people, it's like a grooming thing. People are coming with an agenda, with a perception, and they're looking to see that through. But a lot of, I think in the majority of cases, it isn't like that.
Mhm.
It's so subtle
Mm-hmm.
that actually there are people like, oh, I believe, you know, including black police officers
Yeah.
and other police officers of various ethnicities, and not just police, other in joining other institutions that
Yeah. Yeah.
join saying, I'm looking to make a difference. I'm wanting to be the change. I'm wanting to kind of educate the next generation.
Right.
But the system
Doesn't
and
allow it
it's working, and the various systems are
again.
working at the disadvantage of African peoples. And
Yeah.
so, you know, taking all on mean that actually you're set up in an environment where if you're thinking we're going to be, well, we're going to just be targeting the most deprived areas,
Right.
which just happen to be the system set up will be the areas where you will find the majority of certain people who look a certain way, who have a certain demographic, who will come, you know, and before you know it, and yeah, there are some who have the motivation to, you know, that they hate black people and therefore they're kneeling on someone's neck until they can't breathe. But
But
there
then
are a lot.
what about the four, like this week on Wednesday, the one that's really saddened me, the 19-year-old black girl driving in her car at the stoplight where they threw the
Yes,
acid in her face. And then
yeah.
they laughed as she burned, you know, and it's
See,
that
all of
mindset.
but all of that, this the difficulty. The difficulty that we have is those are the in the face, direct racism that goes on, and everyone can look at that and say how inhumane. And on the
Right.
back of that, we have the protests, and we have people galvanizing in the streets to say, "Come on, we need to do something." However, there are also other cases where it isn't the acid in your face and the N word. It's
No.
the subtlety. It's the
So
discomfort.
the
It's
the
the,
term
oh,
the term that they use for it is microaggression.
microaggressions.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's exactly the
Exactly.
ones that are not only harder to confront because people don't even realize that they're subconsciously perpetuating these microaggressions, but they
Mhm.
are. So anything from in the workplace where when they think that you disagree with something that they said, then you're being aggressive, or if you don't smile when you see them, then you're possibly mean, or just like the amount of times I've had a boss or a manager when they find out my culture, they're like, oh, I have a nanny that's Jamaican, and I'm like, I never asked. They're like, oh, I was just making small talk. I was like, do you go to like random Spanish or Danish people telling them, hey, I have someone who's a caretaker who's like,
No. Yeah.
find this commonality, like, and you know what I mean? It's those things that is harder to have them realize is a problem.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's their way of trying to say, I'm trying to connect with you. You know, I like people of color.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, so do you like when you have a tan too? Do you see what I'm saying? That doesn't make sense. Like for me, I'm one of those people, I love to just change my hair and do whatever. So I went through a phase of, I remember my daughter was getting teased about her hair. And so what I wanted to show her is to be a beautiful black woman, you don't need hair. Okay, we rock anything. So I cut my hair off, and I decided I was gonna locks. I'm now gonna be a Nubian queen. Okay, so I started to grow my locks, and the thing is, again, I knew, having gone for an interview, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna put them on blast. Lloyd's of London, sorry, went for an interview. Yes, I am. Went for an interview, and I saw the receptionist. There was 2 white girls, 1 black, and they all looked the same. 3 Barbies. And I knew when I stepped in, I said, this place ain't gonna work for me. They are not going to accept me for who I am. So when I went in, had the interview, they wanted me. They looked for me. Had the interview, it was a good interview. I knew it was a good interview. I had everything they wanted. The recruiter was like, oh my God, I'm excited. I know you've got the job. Then she said, what's going on? And I said to her, they're not going to call you. She said, no, I'm going to call them because they wanted you. And I was like, I know why they don't want me. Do you see what I mean? So when she called, she said, I'm so confused. I said, why, honey? She said, they said that they just didn't think you would fit. I was like, yeah, I know. I'm not going to fit, because I knew I didn't meet the rhetoric of the Black woman they could put up with. Do you see what I mean? I didn't have that look. I wasn't all weaverlicious, hair down into my tail, this, I don't go with you to the pub at lunchtime because at that stage, I still was a young mom. I had to go to the childman. I don't have time for that. It's also about, I was also told I'm not fluffy. I'm like, what? I'm not fluffy? I'm not meeting the narrative of the Black woman that they need to fit in the workplace. You will, if you notice, and I'm just putting it out there, you will have the Black social worker. Do you remember in the 80s, whatever, growing up, the Black woman that became the social worker? We would have a Black social worker. She would be there anytime, and that would be their Black woman who would think, and she always had locks. Do you remember? The social worker would always have locks. She was like a proper, whatever. But then when you later found out she was married to a white, so then you were like, how does that work? It was confusing. And then, later on, we were allowed to kind of move up into other things because they needed social workers because we need someone to identify with the Black children that were now coming into care. And then we need, we can get a few of you in to be teachers, but then you weren't really meant to let the Black children that you encountered know to be proud of your race and to do whatever. I had a challenge with my history teacher. One day he said, oh, we're doing Black history. Oh my God, I was so excited. He came with a book that was this thin and said to me, Black history. I said, is this the first one of the books? He said, no, this is Black history. I said, no. That says Martin Luther King. That's not Black history. That's one man's identity. And it's not even big. Do you know how much he did? I said, what happened to Marcus Garvey? What happened to Shaka Zulu? What happened to, and I started to name people. And he was like, that's not the class. This is what you said, you're doing Black history. And I need to hear about everybody and coming from Africa and the kings and queens. The man put me out of class. He said I was disrupting his class. And so this is what I'm saying to you about, you want to give me something to be grateful with. You're giving me a little bit of Blackness. Here you are. Now be quiet. Don't make a fuss. And if you behave yourself, we'll even let you get to stay in the outhouse instead of right in the back. You don't have to call us massa. You might even be able to say sir or ma. Do you see what I'm saying? We're to be grateful.
But within all of this, you're right. Yeah, and we see we have the MP Diane Abbott.
Oh my God!
She has experienced such racism and talk about people have been threatened to kill the woman. On her Twitter page and all sorts of stuff. And even down to the subtle things, as Kay was talking about microaggressions. I remember having a team member. Her name's Jo, and Jo and I worked very well together. And we would sit in. Jo was in meetings, and it was interesting to see how people were reacting because Jo was a white woman, older than I, and I was, obviously I presented as I do now, and you could see as people sat down with them wanting to reach out to Jo to start the meeting, to lead out the discussion, to provide the information. If they wanted certain things, they'd look to her. And it would take a while, and Jo and I would laugh because we would have our little kind of like it was a double act and say, get a few minutes into the meeting and say, actually, it's Suzanne who's heading up the team. Jo, what can I say? she's my boss. So if you,
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
but she'd do that. We didn't have, I don't operate in a kind of boss, so whatever kind of way in my teams, but we kind of play that because it's amazing the assumptions that all people make around that. But in
Right.
moving forward, right, the challenge that I have, while I'm not trying to quieten down the kind of the acknowledgement now of the depth of racism, systemic racism in our society, because it has to
Right.
be acknowledged, and we have to
Right.
call these things out. Yeah.
Hmm.
At the same time, there needs to be a space in terms of our own well-being that we find places of positivity to move forward and to wrestle back the narrative,
Right.
because within this space of all this negative perception of black men, there are counter narratives to all of that. But say with going back to Diane and to go back to people I'm making, it's very hard for those counter narratives to come through.
Right.
Because even though Diane Abbott, she was one of the kind of first black women politicians, she got a lot of help, including from our own community.
Yep.
As a black minister, similar with even with Obama, though he's lauded now, but people realise what they had, though he's gone. At the time, while a lot of people liked Obama, there were still many people within our community questioned whether,
Right.
was he fully black? Is he really on our side? Actually, there's certain laws that he introduced during his tenure that weren't always that favourable to black people. Should we vote again? There was people didn't turn out in full.
Right.
She
Right.
wrote, look who's in power. There's something that's gone on there. So there's
Right.
within this space of talking about racism, we have to also ensure that we don't give the narrative so much to this stuff, to these social constructs, to the extent that we erase ourselves.
Right.
And there's something about finding a way through to talk the truth, but also present those parts of our history and our present that are very much not like that. Because
Yeah.
my fear is that while talking about white fragility, I think that book is excellent, and Robin DiAngelo had it on YouTube and everything is
Hmm.
absolutely excellent. But
Hmm.
that is part of that opening up of white colleagues and friends to the opportunities to go through their own process of education. The fact that
Right.
she's a white woman talking about race and
Yeah.
signposting sources means that I don't have to
Do
be
it. Yeah.
educated. I
Yeah.
don't have to do it. And so in order to kind of find space in terms of how do we deal with white fragility, to be honest, I don't want to deal with it. It's not my business. For the purpose of my role, my professional role,
Right.
obviously I address it. And I
Yeah.
think, okay, how can I ensure that conversations around race are engaging white colleagues
Right.
as well as black colleagues so they
Yeah.
can go through that? But in my personal life, if you want to befriend me and we can have a talk on that basis of openness,
Right.
I'm more than open to it. But
Right.
I'm not suddenly gonna have descended on me kind of random series of people who want to suddenly say, "Oh, can you do the work for me? Can you sit and get myself to relive my trauma?" I'm not up for that. I refuse, and I refuse to put anybody that I work with in a situations. Everyone has to do the work. There's no shortcuts here.
But that's the issue, though, isn't it? Because I think people don't to recognize that I have to do something means that I have to acknowledge that there's something wrong with me, and they don't want to do that.
No.
So
Why you say you don't?
no,
Why
but
would you say they
Hold on.
don't?
Let me give you their terms. They're saying when they do recognize, they say thank you. They have gratitude, their excitement, there's discomfort, there is a bit of guilt, embarrassment, motivation, humility, compassion, and
Anna,
curiosity. And then
Anna,
their behaviors, hold on, are reflecting, apology, listening, because sometimes you only want to be listened to, processing, seeking more understanding, grappling, and believing that your journey, your story is real. Because sometimes you get people that just say, oh, please, there's no racism. Let's move on. That's just wiping you out as a whole person. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I'm hearing you, but those people are open-mindedly enough to even pick up the book, read it, and digest it. Whereas my colleague, who I mentioned from the beginning, who I had this conversation with, we were having this conversation for about a good 10 minutes, and we were like, okay, fine. Do you know what? Go and read a book. The moment we said go read a book, what? It was like we said go and hurt yourself. He was just like, he was offended. It's like, well, I don't need to read anything. I don't need to, let's just listen, because we're trying to tell you something. It's like me trying to tell you you have a blind spot, and you still don't realize that you have that blind spot. You're thinking you're seeing 20/20 vision. No. You have a blind spot. We're trying to let you know this is a barrier for you, but because you don't want to see it, you don't want to acknowledge the issues with it or expose the negativities of your super white supremacy, even though you are not, per se owning whatever slaves or whatnot.
Do you know what? Before we leave, I just have to throw this in. For me, I believe that you could only be supreme to me if I believed you were supreme. Because to me, the supremacy is in me feeling submissive and subjective to you. Now, if I believe that we're equal, then you can't be supreme to me. It could be in your head. But if I now believe we're equal and I stand to you, I held my head up, I'm on equal terms, then you'll soon come back down from that inflation. But if I continue to, then it allows you to keep perpetuating, to me, I'm just saying, that mindset. I believe we're all equal. I worked as hard as they say. I worked hard to get here. We also have to struggle. But okay, fine. Then let's do this at even playing field, but in growing up for me, I was told by my dad, I have two things against me. He says, one, you're black, and two, you're a woman. I was so confused. As I got older, I was like, oh, okay. Do you see what I mean? And then when you now try to come as the assertive woman to get to where you need to go, that's when they switch it and say you're aggressive.
But you see, a part of this thing, while ultimately we're dealing with social constructs. So therefore, you're right. As a social construct, if you don't play into it, then you're taking away the power of that thing. However, we're also dealing with systemic issues. And going to kind of talk church here, I do believe we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. These are power and principalities. These are ingrained systems. And so whether you want to believe it or not, it's there.
Oh, come on, let's talk church. Yeah. The church perpetuates this. When you came into the countries with you, they gave you a Bible and said, the Lord says up the Lord.
But in terms...
That's another topic, though. Don't let me get started. Right? You see what I'm saying? But
in terms of but in terms of actually how to counter it, how do you reach beyond that? Yes, when looking at those systems, I think that's the first thing about empowerment.
Right.
And so if, as we're calling for white colleagues to do the work, I personally am doing the work. In terms of even that thing of when we talk about working 10 times harder and, as various barriers, your blackness is a barrier, your gender is a barrier. Well, actually, in terms of my empowerment, I'm teaching my children that actually their various assets of their background will continue to be a gift.
Amen.
And they should dream and envision their lives as a gift. Right. Because to not do and equip them with all the qualifications and there's all of the other things required for them to live their best life. Because while wanting to counter the system, if I feed the fear and certain messages, without realizing, while I'm doing it for protection, I create the perception that they have to be super women in order to survive. They have that actually they're never going to be able to really have a white friend because white people don't get us. And my friend has to really come from my community. And before you know it, without realizing, we're creating the systems
we are creating
that perpetuate it.
And that is true. And I did say that we as a people also are prejudiced and we also have our own racism amongst ourselves. So that's neither here nor there. And even when I hear all of this thing about, the cops killing us, the cops don't kill us as much as we kill ourselves. But that's also another topic.
Yeah, I think, we have to be a bit nuanced in that conversation. We've got to be a bit,
because in a couple of weeks, we have another talk, and I guess I want you guys on. It's going to be black.
You just lost the audience there.
The ratings are going down now.
But we have to keep it real though. Black on black, we do have that. Okay, in our communities.
But there are issues, but in terms of the ratio,
dealing with the issues at hand, I decided I want to have the same rights as Jews. That's what I decided. I thought, why can't I have? There's anti-Semitic goes for Jewish. I want anti-Negro. If you say anything anti-Negro, then I want that. Why? Because they had 1.8 million people murdered. We've had over 28 million murdered.
That divisive. You see, even that, Anna, we've got to be careful. Because while, yes, you're right, there are certain reparations and certain things that have been for certain ethnicities.
It's for an ethnicity.
If we play into that, we lose sight of a bigger picture of what really we should be fighting for.
That's why I knew you'd say that. Someone would say that. Jewish is not an ethnicity. That's the whole point.
It is under UK law. It is an ethnicity under the Equality Act 2010.
I need to be Jewish. I'm changing.
Yeah, it's actually they are a race as defined.
No, I know in the UK, but what I'm saying is generally they're not. Do you see what I'm saying? You've got European Jews, you've got this, and that's their faith belief. Do you see what I'm saying to you?
Okay,
that's their belief.
You're losing me a bit. Okay. I don't agree. Yeah, it's complicated. There's a lot of stuff, and the space that
do we classify then our Ethiopian Jews as the same? Because they don't deal with them the same, but they're Ethiopian Jews.
Well, I think are they a race?
There is This is the thing. All I can say is there is diversity amongst the experience, the global experience of various ethnicities and things, a lot of diversity. However, there is a particular similarities with the 1% of the very wealthy within our planet that are retaining most of the wealth. There are demographic similarities that we can draw on, that that's where we should place our focus. Sometimes what I feel when you start digging into the we talked about colorism, we've talked about different ethnicities. Actually, I'm looking at that 1%, and I'm thinking to myself, for my African peoples, I want that money back. Now I could be looking at what the Jewish man is having and stuff, fine. But that's great. I'm not looking to take back what that was stolen from them, because it was stolen. I'm looking at that 1% who still got my money and say, yes, please.
But that's the let me have that back. But that's the reason why I said that, because you've got like the Rothschilds and people like that, where they built their wealth off our backs. And so what I'm saying is, it seems when they only then identify and say, okay, Jewish is a race. Because remember, we the African dysphoria. And one thing I want to say to leave us on, I have seen for myself, when you have someone who opens their mouth and they have an accent that is from an African country, I've witnessed that they are treated differently to us who are not from that, who are of the dysphoria. It's like, that's a true African. Do you see what I'm saying? They identify, that's an African. You're the slave. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm saying to you, in what way then will we stem the racism and get that African dysphoria to have equality? Because that's who has the inequality. It's the African dysphoria that have the inequality, because you can go to Oxford and you will see people from Kenya, Zimbabwe, anyway, they came from there, their parents came from there. We've got wealth in Africa, please. Do you see what I'm saying? And they are respected there. But you're not going to see us who's coming struggling. They've gone and given you 10 scholarships for Black people. It's for the BME. It's for the African diaspora that they're giving you the 10 scholarships for. The ones that they don't initially identify as being able to come to Oxford. This is what I'm saying to you. And so I've seen that with my own eyes in the workplace. They will say, oh, yes, you're from Africa, the name or whatever. It's such a nice place. I went to, Gambia and blah, 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 and they have a lovely discussion. They talk about all things lovely. And then they'll come to you and they'll say, so where are you from again? Because you're not from there. And then you have to go in the breakdown of where you come from. So that's something I've experienced anyway. So I just made the joke of saying, is it then if we had something anti whatever that then they may give us some props? That's all it is, because,
Yeah, I'm into anti-racism.
Yeah.
And I'm into very much anti-racism.
No, the reason why I didn't say just anti-racism, because then that goes back to when people say, well, then all lives matter. That's why I didn't say that. You've got Black Lives Matter. No, well, all lives matter. Yes, but at the moment, it's the Black people that are having disparity. So that's the topic we're talking about right now. We're not disputing that all lives matter, but at the moment, it's the Black disparity that we're talking about. But you want to dilute it again by saying all lives matter. So that's why I was making the joke.
Oh, okay.
You say anti-Negro, then that highlights this is the issue. Do you see what I'm saying? Like my friend got fired last week because she said something anti-Semitic.
Okay.
How many people have got fired from saying something racist and derogatory about us? That's what I'm saying.
There's been a few,
There have been a few. There have been, but not as quick.
You see, I think it's a lot of the time race is politicized. And so if you're talking about anti-racism or Black or whatever, it becomes a left wing or right wing or whatever. Whereas we've taken the humanity out of this drive. Actually, sorry to harp on it, but the anti-racism I'm talking about is if you are about humanity, human rights, justice, social justice, then you will be appalled, concerned, saddened, more than saddened. You will be willing to stand up and stand side by side and weep with communities when they see a George Floyd, all right? When they see any of these things happen, because it should get you in your gut. If you are ambivalent, well, they say that the opposite of love is not hate, but ambivalence, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you are ambivalent, and then if you sometimes do not feel touched or not motivated, then there is a question I say about, well, that is totally then that actually pours light into your wider concept of humanity as a whole. And I prefer to have that because it's, do you know what, it cuts to the root of who you are and what you stand for.
Right. Well,
and this is
I think so. Okay, so let's have a close there. So Susan, we can come to you last. Kate-Ann, your last thoughts on where do we go from here, and is White Fragility, it's a great book, but is it really, relevant?
So I think the only reason why it may be or seem irrelevant is because you're already Black, so you already know everything that's in there. I do still feel that it is necessary for non-Blacks, because I don't even think it's just a white thing. There's a lot of other races who get to pass under the white privilege. So I believe it's necessary for a lot of them to educate themselves with that. And similar to therapy, it's a matter of when you're ready to own up and say that you're wrong, and completely and utterly open to any sort of guilt and wrong that you've done. Until people are ready to actually face that head on or start having those conversations, then it's still just, oh, there's racism. So yes, I do feel like white fragility is a real thing. I do feel like more people need to be aware of what it is. And if that's where they start, rather than badgering one of their Black friends, then it's something.
Someone asked me who got fired from the Labour Party, and it's her name is Long Bailey.
Yeah.
And Keir
Well,
Starmer
that can,
sacked her because he said that she used anti-Semitic language in a paper that she wrote.
Yeah.
So someone's asking me who got fired. So
And she refused to take it down.
Yeah, and she refused to take it down. That's true. She did. Yes. So Janelle, what's your last words?
My last words. Yeah, the book is very much relevant. It's very much timely, in fact, to be honest. And I think it's timely in the sense that it's exposing the other side of racism that white people particularly aren't completely aware of. We always see the black side and seeing the negative effects of us, but we're not seeing, you know, what you are benefiting, if you like. I don't want to use that word benefit, but that's kind of what it is. So, and it's one, be recognizing that, and also it's also about you having to do the work. Everyone's got to work. Everyone's got to do their part in exposing it, calling it out. I mean, if I hear you say so, I'm coming for you. So listen, if you're at my workplace and I hear you, listen, there's a band of people coming for you. No doubt. It's going to be there.
So you are your brother's keeper is the sort of mindset that you are.
No, but that's the whole point.
Yeah.
There's no I'm not racist. There is just either you are racist or you are fighting against it. And I think that's the issue that we're dealing with. You have to recognize it in yourself, and you also have to in wherever you're coming from, and you also have to call it out and deal with it and be able to say, okay, am I going to continue down this road, or am I going to dismiss it and not say it, and anyone does, if I do hear anyone else saying it, I'm going to call them out on it. That's how the ripple effect starts, and that's how things actually get cleared up. So it's also about exposing that issue, but you've got to be open to that yourself.
Awesome. Okay. Wow. We got, see, look at these bright black females. Go on, Susan, the last word with you.
No, I think Jen said it
Said it well.
She
okay.
said it all. So I'm just endorse everything that she said.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, I want to thank you. We've had some comments and things. We got people that say the fear of missing out. You know, FOMO. I mean, it's true. We we're so blessed. We have initiated so many trends that we don't even realize. Okay, whether it's music, whether it's fashion, whether it's so many things. Even in housekeeping, the vacuum. There's so many stuff that we have initiated. And it lovely, like Hidden Figures. I'm so happy now. NASA's Rich really gonna recognize and put her name up, because without her, it wouldn't have happened. So, these are kind of positives. And I totally agree with you that the narrative, it shouldn't actually begin with us because we didn't start it. I think it should begin with the individuals that now say genuinely that they're willing to change. And the ones that are like digging their feet in because they're comfortable or they choose to ignore, the others need to poke them in the elbow and wake up. This is actually the reality that we're living in. And do you want your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren to continue living in a biased, racist society? That's my viewpoint. So I want to say thank you to all my learned women here. Thank you very much. And to our audience who joined with us, we did go over, but it was a juicy topic, and I'm sure I didn't help with some of my ideas, but I like to be there with advocate and like put stuff out there. So, thank you so much. I've got people on Instagram telling me madness, but yeah. So I really appreciate you guys. Just to let you all know, some of the topics coming up, we've got the Empire Windrush, or was it the Titanic? We've got Black on Black, and we've got the myth between the Black relationship. And this topic, I know, is going to be controversial as well. It covers where oftentimes you will see the female in the relationship is of, educated pedigree or whatever, but the partner is a hidden drug dealer or some rhetoric. I see the foreheads, but it does happen. Okay, you laugh, but yeah, I'm gonna put it out there. So, because that's one of the things that in our community we hide that stuff, and it's something that it's not new. It's something that I have been observing. Some of the cases I've dealt with, the women that come are all high earners, they're this, they're whatever, but then they may have a male partner who's in this situation. But that's another topic.
Nothing. I was like, that ain't me, but okay.
Yeah, cool. I'm not saying that's you, but you guys think about it if you've not encountered that. And you're like, what the jail? Because I know I have.
Okay.
I love Susan. She's like, this woman is mad as hell. Oh, God. So thank you all for being a part. So we're going to say bye to everyone else. We will end.